To tell this tale, we must journey back to the Paris of the 12th century, a city just beginning to flourish again, rising from the shadows of centuries of invasions and unrest. It was in the year 1100 that a young man arrived to study at the school of Notre Dame. His name was Pierre Abelard. He came from noble blood in Brittany, but he had no taste for a life of idleness or inherited wealth. Abelard wanted more, not more riches, but more thought, more truth, more brilliance. He gave up his inheritance and chose the discipline of the mind instead. And in Paris, the world took notice. His brilliance dazzled the intellectual elite, and his reputation grew quickly. But with fame came friction. Abelard gained notoriety for his radical ideas and his refusal to bow before authority. He challenged his teachers, he stirred debate like a firebrand, and most dangerously, he dared to question the church itself. In that age, such defiance was a kind of heresy. So he was dismissed. But this did very little to silence the young radical. For the next 15 years, he traveled across France, teaching, studying, and founding schools of his own. By the time he returned to Paris in 1115, he was 36, celebrated, self-assured, and, by his own account, arrogant even. But Abelard had not yet met his match. At that time, a young woman lived near the school under the watchful care of her uncle, Canon Fulbert. Her name was Héloïse. Fulbert had spared no expense for her education, and it showed. By her early 20s, Héloïse was already something rare, a scholar of immense reputation, fluent in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. She was a writer, a theologian, a thinker who had devoured books most men had never even seen. She was not only admired for her beauty, but for a mind that could match any man in Paris, perhaps even surpass them. Even then, Héloïse was spoken of as Abelard's equal, and when he set eyes on her, he was entranced. He couldn't keep away from the smart woman who put even men to shame with her knowledge. Unable to stay away from her, he decided to approach her uncle, but Abelard couldn't tell Fulbert that he fancied the man's niece, because Fulbert was very protective of Héloïse. So Abelard asked to become Héloïse's tutor. This was an offer Fulbert couldn't refuse, and he was even quite happy with it. He loved his niece so much that he wanted her to be as knowledgeable as possible. After all, who better to guide his brilliant niece than the most celebrated mind in Paris? However, Abelard still didn't like the distance between him and Héloïse, so he told Fulbert that his own quarters made it difficult for Héloïse to focus on her studies properly. Hence, he suggested that he move in with them for serious tutoring. The uncle agreed, and Abelard moved in. Now, the radical could focus on wooing the woman who intrigued him. Teaching Héloïse was the last thing on his mind. He focused more on poetry, and it isn't hard to imagine the duo exchanging witty remarks. It then became more of poetry of glances, of fingertips grazing parchment, of breathless pauses between lines. As they spent more time together, the boundary between tutor and pupil disappeared. Their affection blossomed in secret, then boldly, shamelessly, without restraint. They became reckless, daring. Abelard would later confess, "Our nights were sleepless with lovemaking. Our desires left no stage of love untried." Yes, those were the words of a man of the church, an unmarried scholar describing his affair with the cherished niece of a powerful clergyman in such colorful language. And that was only the beginning. Her uncle could no longer ignore the love that had blossomed between them. It had grown too bold, too visible, too alive to be mistaken for anything else. And when Fulbert at last discovered the truth, he tore them apart. But love, once awakened, does not sleep so easily. Their separation did nothing to dim the flame. And soon, it was Héloïse who carried the consequence of their passion. She was pregnant. To keep things undercover, she left her uncle's house under the cover of his absence and went in secret to Abelard's family home. There, in the care of his sister, their child, a son named Astrolabe, was born. Abelard, now a father and desperate to protect what they had, approached Fulbert to ask for forgiveness. He proposed marriage one, but he asked for a secret one in order to protect his reputation and career. Fulbert agreed, but Héloïse did not. She resisted the idea with all her intellect and fire. To her, marriage was not a safeguard. It was a sentence. She feared it would destroy Abelard, not elevate him. And this was for two reasons. She was scared of the disgrace it would bring to her beloved, and also the consequences it would bring to her if the world found out that she was trying to cage its brightest mind in marriage. But most importantly, Heloise loved her freedom. She believed marriage was restrictive. To her, marriage was little more than a transaction, too hollow, too public, too impure to hold the love they shared. The name of wife may seem more sacred or more binding, she told him, but sweeter for me will always be the word mistress. But Abelard insisted they get married. He did it out of love, out of fear, perhaps out of pride. In 1116, they married in Paris, quietly, solemnly, hidden from the world. But their happiness was short-lived. Heloise herself sensed the doom to come. "We shall both be destroyed," she wrote. "All that is left to us is suffering as great as our love has been." And she was right. Although they had all agreed to keep the marriage a secret to protect Abelard's career, something was about to go wrong. Fulbert had agreed to this as well. But soon, he betrayed them. He made the marriage public, and Paris turned. Abelard's name, once spoken in reverence, became a whisper of scandal. The court of public opinion was swift and merciless. Reputation ruined, threats mounting, Abelard acted quickly. He sent Heloise away from the city, to safety, to silence. She went to the convent at Argentois, not as a nun, but as a refuge. But Fulbert was never told the reason why. He didn't understand why Abelard would dare leave his dear niece. To him, it seemed a cruel abandonment, a seduction followed by disgrace. In his eyes, Abelard had cast her off, had tossed her aside, and buried her in the church like a shameful secret. And that was one humiliation too many. So Fulbert began to plot his revenge. And the revenge came when Abelard was sleeping at night. He ordered a group of men to sneak into Abelard's room to cut him up. Fulbert wanted to punish the body part that caused his niece shame. Castration, in those days, was a crime of the highest order, a punishment that forever severed more than just Abelard's physicality. Fulbert was punished and scorned for what he did, but this did not change the fact that Abelard will now have to live the remaining part of his life without a body part. This broke Abelard, and he was so ashamed that he couldn't face society again, so he withdrew into a life of solitude. He took refuge in the monastic life, seeking peace within the quiet of the monastery's walls. Since he could no longer perform as a man, he encouraged his dear love, Heloise, to also embrace the religious life. So she also entered a convent, her heart torn between faith and the love that still lingered in the corners of her soul. They never shared the warmth of a husband and wife again. But even in separation, even in silence, their love refused to die. Even without the passionate side of their love still continued to endure. So they began to write to each other. Despite everything, they still had their letters. Fragile, yet fierce, they became their only way to stay connected. A thread pulling them together across the vast distance between them. What followed were the 4 personal letters, written straight from the heart, filled with all the passion and pain they had shared over the years. You can almost feel the weight of their words, the longing, the regret. Then there were the 3 letters of direction, where Abelard, now a monk, tried to guide Heloise through the spiritual life they now both found themselves in. Their love was no doubt a strange kind of love, but it was one that still carried meaning. Those letters became everything, their sacred exchange, the one thing left of the bond they shared. In one of her letters to Abelard, Heloise had written, "You know, beloved, as the whole world knows how much I have lost in you, how at one wretched stroke of fortune, that supreme act of flagrant treachery, robbed me of my very self in robbing me of you, and how my sorrow for my loss is nothing compared with what I feel for the manner in which I lost you." But to truly understand Abelard's suffering, you have to slog through his endless sermonizing, because in a way, that had been the road he'd chosen to walk. He saw their affair and everything that had followed as a kind of divine trial. He was convinced that the suffering had been sent by God to teach them both a lesson, to open their eyes, to lead them to salvation. So, he wrote things like this. "So intense were the fires of lust which bound me to you, that I set those wretched, obscene pleasures, which we blush even to name, above God as above myself. Nor would it seem that divine mercy could have taken action except by forbidding me these pleasures altogether, without future hope, and so it was wholly just, merciful." He was convinced that somehow their terrible affair had been necessary for their spiritual redemption. Now, Heloise, well, she wasn't having it. To the surprise of many, especially given her position as an abbess, Heloise had rejected any notion of salvation that Abelard had tried to offer her. She wrote in elegant Latin that even if Augustus, the emperor of the world, offered her marriage, she wouldn't appreciate it. Now, why would the abbess say this? This was because she saw being called Abelard's whore dearer and more honorable than being called an empress. Abelard had talked about their love as something obscene, like something no better than lust. So she really wanted him to know just how sacred she saw their love. And it hadn't stopped there. She had written, "Even during the celebration of the Mass, when our prayers should be purer, lewd visions of those pleasures take such a hold upon my unhappy soul that my thoughts are on their wantonness instead of on my prayers. I should be groaning over the sins I have committed, but I can only sigh for what I have lost." Heloise was basically saying that, rather than feel bad for her sins when praying, she was sadder because of the love she lost instead. Remember, these words were coming from an abbess, someone whom people looked up to in the church. And yet, she had admitted, "Men called me chaste. They did not know the hypocrite I was." Heloise loved Abelard just as much that she was not ashamed to admit their love in spite of her position in the church. And so, the letters had continued. Abelard trying to convince Heloise that their fate had been part of a grand divine plan. Heloise resisting his interpretation and with every word suggesting that he had known less than she had about the will of God and the strange path to salvation. Heloise was stubborn down to the end, insisting that her love for Abelard would never change. And Abelard, perhaps crushed by the consequences of their love and how he deprived his beloved of a normal life, couldn't live with his decisions. Instead, he spent the rest of his life atoning for this.